Excellent. Well, this is the few and the brave that have made it to the ordinance model ordinance presentation this afternoon. And it's really, it's unfortunately everybody else is going to miss out on what's probably going to be the best one of the day. I'm Ed Boik. I'm a senior planner here with Matrix Design Group, and we have Laney Corey with us, and we're going to be giving you a presentation today on model ordinances, mostly in the model ordinances related to the topic at hand of the day, which was housing. So we're going to kind of walk through two of the more recent bills that have been approved by the Arizona legislature that affect local communities and how they can regulate single family housing, the missing middle housing, accessory dwelling units, and more. We're going to talk about some of the details of those things, go into some of the benefits of utilizing a model ordinance or pursuing technical assistance for the production of an ordinance to address the state legislation, and as well kind of talk about some other national related success stories where addressing the missing middle housing has resulted in an increase in permitting or a diversification of housing, or in some cases, an actual measurable reduction in the entry level into those markets for housing. So it's all new across the country and how this has been pushed for missing middle. Hopefully you can get some good information from this. And if you do have a question along the way, just raise your hand by clicking that little icon on your screen. You can let us know that you want to have a question. You can type it in the chat. That works as well. But otherwise, please make sure that you keep it on mute. I think that we're taking care of that ourselves, but I'm just going to repeat that just to make sure. But yes, if you wanted to provide some feedback, you can certainly do so in the participants window through the Zoom menu bar. So first point is, why model ordinances to even begin with? Well, a model ordinance, being that it's something that's drafted to be a consistent and standardized model to be used by many communities and customized to help expedite implementing those regulations. They're much easier to implement. You have a great framework to start with. You can tailor it for the local conditions much more easily, but a lot of the background work, the heavy duty work that's been done in these model ordinances benefits you as a community because it's done the heavy lift on research. It's done the heavy lift on some of that initial outreach and equitable outreach to make sure it reaches all audiences when it's being developed. Additionally, those model ordinances go through a legal vetting process to make sure that they are defensible and largely going to be something you can move forward with confidence that's going to give you a good results. And because it is a model and it's got everything in one package, you can have design standards in there, illustrations, the development regulations, and it just makes it a lot more efficient to move it through the process and implement it, especially when there are changes that are necessary through several different elements of a development regulation set, whether it's in the subdivisions regulations, design standards, zoning, or whatnot. So pursuing a model like the model ordinance solution can really be helpful. And it was just as we learned earlier today in discussing some of the model ordinances that have been created in response to legislation from 2023, there will be model ordinances following that will come out as recommendations for sure. But in the meantime, organizations like yourselves, MAG, Matrix Design Group, we're working to develop solutions that work across a large number of communities in response to this legislation as well. So let's just walk through this really quick and just give you a little bit of background about each of the bills that is most impactful to why we have to look at our ordinances. And both of them are directed at creating additional housing with the purpose of creating affordability. House Bill 2720 is an accessory dwelling unit requirement, and it affects all those cities that have 75,000 people or more. They must allow ADUs in all the districts where single family detached dwellings are allowed. And that's got to be incorporated into those regulations by January 2025. There are some exemptions to that, though. There is an exemption for tribal lands. There's an exemption for those properties that are in the vicinity of a military airport, as well as those properties that are in the vicinity of a public airport, both as they're defined in state statutes. So in the West Valley, that's going to affect communities like Surprise, Almirage, Goodyear, and Buckeye, and they're not going to be able to incorporate ADU allowances through the bill. They're not mandated to do it in accordance with that bill in those areas that are in the vicinity of Luke Air Force Base. And the same applies for those airports that are all over the valley, including Sky Harbor, Goodyear, Deer Valley, and so on. House Bill 2721 is the missing middle bill. This is the one that's got a little bit more specificity in how it's to be used. But basically, any cities over 75,000 as of the last census have to allow for this missing middle housing type within any of the areas where single family residential zoning is already in place within 1 mile of a central business district. Additionally, cities also have to allow for up to 20% of any new development of more than 10 contiguous acres to have missing middle housing. And I think there's going to be some interpretations that will come forward that make it a little bit more clear about what exactly that means. In terms of, does a city have to require 20% to be missing middle housing versus they have to support it if it's proposed, or does it apply only to commercial developments or residential developments, or does it apply to all developments? I think there's a couple little questions regarding that I certainly don't have the answers for at this point. But regardless, the two requirements to provide missing middle housing, either in those central business districts or within 1 mile of them, as well as those new developments, is really showing an interest by the state to create more opportunities for different and diverse housing solutions. There are exemptions to this as well. Unincorporated areas don't have to follow these requirements. And those areas that are lacking urban services, which is a conveniently undefined term in the bill, as well as water and sewer services, and then those same restrictions about the areas that are within the vicinity of military airports and public airports. Now, cities have a little bit more time to look at that. They have to get that complete by January of 2026. Many communities, Phoenix is one of them, is already moving ahead on both of this stuff to get ahead of this, and hopefully have their codes ready to go well before those drop dead dates come forward. So many communities in the valley do have HOAs, or there's private standards, CC&Rs or agreements or restrictions that might be on the property that are more specific and related to uses. If those regulations, those private regulations exist, then they can prevent ADUs or these missing middle housing types. However, cities cannot instigate or require that these CC&Rs or regulations be put in through a private agreement as part of their review process. So those areas that do have HOAs right now, if the CC&Rs talk about uses and those uses regulate or limit the ability to have duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, townhomes, or ADUs, then those areas would not be able to be take advantage of this state legislation. All other areas that do not have these private rules would be subject to city zoning, town zoning, and they would be able to have that benefit conferred to them if the town put that into place. So we're going to dig into the ADU legislation really quick. Again, cities over 75,000 have to allow for these ADUs anywhere a single family home is allowed, single family detached home is allowed. The ADUs do have some regulations associated, one of which is 75% of the gross floor area of the main house, or 1,000 square feet, is the limit. So essentially 1,000 square feet has to be allowed by right for an ADU. Additionally, there's some restrictions for communities, like you can't implement significant design requirements. You have to allow for 5-foot side yard setback and rear yard setbacks. You can have one attached, one detached on all properties. If you have a property over 1 acre in size, you're able to have a third ADU on your property If you have an attached, a detached, you can have yet one more detached. And that one has to be restricted to those making 80% of the median income of the area or less. So there's quite a bit of densification that can occur here through the state legislation for ADUs. If the cities don't do anything, if you choose not to make a change to your codes to comply with that requirement, then the state says, well, then you don't have any restrictions. Their ADUs are allowed everywhere without limits. So it's really to your advantage to pursue modifications to your code if you haven't done so already, or at least make it a priority through the remainder of this year to have it in place by January 1st. What are ADUs? There's a million different terms for it. Granny flats, mother-in-law apartments, garage apartments, tiny homes. Tiny homes can be regular homes too, but there's a lot of different names for what an ADU can be. The state legislation calls them ADUs. Phoenix local seems like we'd like to call them casitas, but everybody's got a different term for it. There's a lot of them. They can have a full kitchen facility. They don't have to have a kitchen facility, but they are separate living quarters, and that's the main requirement of being an ADU through the state law. And as I noted, they could be detached, attached. They can be part of the house in the upper level with the separate entrance, or lower level above the garage conversion. There's a lot of different ways they can be executed. In all solutions, they're either attached or they're detached, and the state legislation says cities and towns have to allow for both. This is just another way of showing the same, converting a garage, adding an ADU to the rear of the property, attaching it to the rear, doing a basement conversion, just different ways to visualize. So why would someone want to have an ADU other than because they're being told to through a state law? Individual property owners can look at some of the advantages of ADUs and say, this is going to be good for my resale because it can attract buyers that are looking for those multi-generational housing solutions, guest housing, or flexible spaces that could be used for adult children that are looking for a place to live affordably until they can save more money and move out, or they can become a rental income stream. The state law does allow for ADUs to be either used as short-term or long-term rentals. So that's been preserved through the regulations, in keeping with other regulations at the state level that have preserved the right for people to have short-term rentals. So they are an affordable housing solution. They provide affordable housing for family members, as I noted. They can be for seniors or people who choose to live alone and want to live simply. It's a great way to diversify and provide some more housing opportunities for those who might have different lifestyles or things that they are looking for in a home that's not going to be requiring the same level of commitment or the financial commitment, for that matter, that a larger or standardized home would have. So it could be considered as a stepping stone or an entry-level home, whether it's for rent or purchase. Again, flexibility with living spaces, because it could be used for guest housing, could be used for office space, could be used for multi-generational living, a she shed, it could be a shop or a guy's room, whatever you want to call it. I mean, there's some opportunities to flex that space and use it differently if it's not going to be used as an ADU for the benefit of the owner and resident of that main unit. If it is used for a rental, of course, that gives you an additional income stream, which can help pay down the mortgage on the main home, provide a reliable income stream for that. But you do get all the benefits and headaches of being a landlord as well if you move in that direction. But it is an opportunity that you could take advantage of. As for the missing middle bill, again, all lots that are zoned single-family residential, cities over 75,000, within 1 mile of a central business district, and the areas that are quote unquote attract community activity, as the legislation puts it. However, industrial properties, industrial areas that generate activity or attract activity do not qualify. And I think it still remains to be seen exactly what are areas that attract community activity. It seems that in the meantime, many people have determined that many cities are contemplating that to mean areas that are generating pedestrian activities. So the central business district thought people getting out, having multimodal opportunities, ability to walk, Boik, more of a city-oriented area rather than just any area that's attracting community activity. And again, any 20% of any new development of more than 10 contiguous acres is required to do it. There's duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, and townhomes. They can be attached, detached, stacked, or clustered. And all of that has to be permitted by right in the same fashion that you would a single family home. I know many communities are using those model home plans or the standard plans for new builds and new subdivisions. And so it's a very quick permit over the counter. But in those instances where you have custom homes or individual one-off lots that are being developed with a single family home, the same things that apply to that to be processed through a permitted review process has to be applied to these other units in those single family areas. So duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, townhomes would all have that same level of administrative over-the-counter review that these single family homes get. So if this is not, again, the punishment for not complying or the risk of not complying is that you will have missing middle housing allowed on all of the lots in a municipality zoned for single family residential without any limitations if you don't get this put into place. But fortunately, you have a little bit more time to figure out the details on this and how to make it work properly than you did for the ADUs. This is just visually illustrating some things that can be put into a model ordinance or even your ordinance once it's adopted to help better illustrate some of these terms. Because when you think about the number of units that could be put on a property and what they mean by attached or detached or stacked or whatever it might be, there's a lot of different ways to execute that. And you can see that whether it's through an ADU or a missing middle housing type, the visuals really help tell the story. And that's going to be something kind of note throughout this is that it's not just having good effective regulations in place through a model ordinance or any other ordinance, but it's how you tell the story with that, how you're descriptive to those that pick this up and those that are potentially your supporters as you bring this ordinance through. In the other sessions, you heard a lot about community engagement, how to engage with the community, and how to inform the community so they can understand how you're moving forward to try to create housing solutions. And as much as it's important to discuss and engage with those that may have resistance to this, it's also to make your code, make your diagrams, make your illustrations, tell a story that your supporters can get behind and really rally and embrace as they move that forward against those that may be against it and are likely not to ever be convinced to support a solution like this. These are other ways we can do it. You don't have to have fancy 3D graphics with shading. You can use line drawings, but as long as it clearly helps someone understand how those units could be arranged on a single property, how they all meet the minimum zoning requirements that are required through legislation and your local code, how it's consistent and compatible with the areas that it's in, you're going to have success. So this is just showing some of the other solutions with the attached triplexes, townhomes or side-by-side triplexes. The legislation is really interesting in that it doesn't really limit how many units can be in a row for a townhome. And it seems to be only limited by the size of the parcel. So you could have, conceivably 20 in a row if building code allowed it, if the parcel was large enough, attached side by side. And that would qualify as missing middle housing on that. You could also have as little as, 2, but then you're getting into duplex territory. But these solutions that you see on the slide, be it detached quadplex or those attached units, are present in the valley right now and have been utilized through usually planned area developments or some other customized zoning solution to accommodate those unique housing types. I'm thinking of developments in the West Valley that are sticking out to me, such as in Surprise or in Buckeye. You have Verrado and Marley Park and Surprise, Verrado and Buckeye. Both of those had planned area developments or planned community development documents associated with them that allowed for clustered homes, cottage homes, and other types of unique housing solutions that fit this missing middle type. But it had to be done through a PAD. Now there's an opportunity to put this into your standard regulations and not have to go through that extra level of review to make it happen. But because it's in the standard regulations, it's even more important that you get it right, or think about all the potential impacts or unintended consequences that come of integrating this into your standards. This is where missing middle lines up. It's that in between. I think most of us understand this and understand that there is a desperate need in our communities to find space between what would be detached single family homes and the more urban mid-rise or high-rise developments or condominium units or apartment units. The more we can provide these solutions in between, the more resilient, sustainable these communities can be. It's not going to be without challenges, as we all know, and helping to work with the communities, but using a good ordinance is going to help us get there. So benefits, I've talked about these a bit. You know, it provides choice. Not only choice to solve stagnant, undeveloped parcels in an infill situation, but it also provides choice to give more diversity for diverse lifestyles. People of all different backgrounds or all different stages of their life are looking for housing near to where they work. And when a community is dominated by maybe a handful of different choices, be it either single family, detached, or apartments, it becomes very difficult for, say, new employees or young employees to find housing that's convenient to where they work, and resulting in, you know, more driving, less sustainable solutions, more expenses through transportation rather than housing for them. But it also contributes to impacts to environmental impacts, heat island impacts, stormwater management issues, and long-term infrastructure maintenance requirements that become incredibly expensive. So the more you can find ways to put this missing middle densified solutions that integrate into single family areas in your community, the better we can resolve those issues. Many of these valley cities are nearing build out. You know, Tempe for one's boxed in, and they're recognizing and moving, growing denser in order to address those issues. But this is going to be something that's facing many other communities as well, as they find that they're not able to expand into areas because of infrastructure restrictions, environmental restrictions, or whatnot. There's some practical limits that may be coming up that would restrict where things could happen, but building denser is always one way you can address the housing needs for your community. So these smaller units that are often part of missing middle housing are going to be likely more affordable, but they do have the same potential to become expensive if the supply is limited and they're in a high demand area. So the more units you can provide, the better. Again, missing middle really helps with that sustainability aspect when you're looking at viability of alternative transportation, micromobility solutions, transit, biking, can make our infrastructure support more people without having to add more infrastructure. So what are some of the results of what model ordinance has been put in place? I can talk about Oregon as a recent example. In 2021, there was legislation that went forward that was very similar to Arizona's, that required all the communities that had urban growth boundaries in Oregon. I believe it was also those communities under 20,000, 20,000 or greater in population, had to implement these missing middle housing solutions. And I have two different communities illustrated up here. Bend, Oregon, which is a little bit smaller, but it was also an area that was having very significant housing issues. And then Portland, which is also a poster child for great growth boundary, inward investment, but it also ran into big housing challenges where those neighborhoods were not transitioning quick enough to accommodate the increased populations. So in Bend, what they found is that after they implemented the new regulations from the model ordinance to allow for these other types of housing, they had over 650 units go into permitting and construction within the first month of that. in the previous 6 months, they had 62 homes that had completed construction. So there was a huge difference in how many houses started versus how many were completed in the past 6 months. It's over, it's clearly a tenfold increase in starts for that community. And because it is only, this is data as of 2022, some of those longer term impacts about what has this done for affordability, what has this done for, maintaining that momentum, we don't really have that information yet. It is being developed and being accounted for in Oregon. Both Portland, Ben and others are doing the same things that we're doing by having to look at those housing needs assessments and do updates. That's going to tell a lot to those legislators that supported these statutes, as well as the local community, about how these codes can influence and impact the housing supply in those communities. So in Portland, the really big takeaway was that in the first 12 months, they also saw a huge influx of new homes. 650 new homes were permitted in their infill project areas. The vast majority of those units were missing middle housing types. There was also a significant chunk of ADUs. Single family dwellings were only 16% of the new starts. The missing middle types included, those creative ADU attached units that could, duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes. I believe there was somewhere around 73% were duplexes, and I think 20% were triplexes, and like 16%. I'm getting the numbers wrong, but it's something like in those ballpark were the numbers that were applicable for all these new missing middle housing starts. It was quite a significant change from what they had seen. There it is. See, there, I knew I had it on a slide somewhere. 76% fourplexes, 13% duplexes, 23% were second ADUs. So again, pretty significant changes. I'm going to kick this over to Laney really quick to talk about what the solutions can look like.
Thanks, Ed. So kind of over these next few slides, we'll be taking a look at some examples of some design solutions, just to kind of help with compatibility and making sure that as these missing middle housing products are introduced into your community, how we can make sure that they remain visually cohesive and compatible with the area. So on this first slide here, you'll notice how these products are really designed to seamlessly integrate into existing single-family neighborhoods. So a lot of that comes from mirroring the architectural styles, heights, setbacks of surrounding homes in the area, really fitting the scale appearance of the existing buildings, and noticing that although these products are duplexes and triplexes, really given the enhanced design, you're really able to maintain the neighborhood character while also expanding the housing availability in the area without disrupting maybe that visual cohesion.
Yeah, I was going to add to that, Laney, is that although the one on the left is showing you a more of a turn of the century 1920s, solution, that fits so seamlessly into the neighborhoods like that. You would never know. You would never know that that was a duplex once you really paid attention to those front doors. So there are ways to make this work, as Laney was saying, that can fit right into the context of an area. The bottom right one that shows the Spanish style side-by-side duplexes, that's actually a product that was being offered in Buckeye and the Verado project fairly recently. I believe they're under construction right now in that area, but I'm not sure if they're complete yet. I saw Mandy's on here. Maybe she knows. I'm gonna call you out, Mandy. You're part of this now.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
I was just noting that illustration that's on the bottom right is a Spanish style home that's in Verado, or it was proposed with some of the models in Verado by Richmond American, I believe, recently. And I didn't know if they actually had been constructed or if there was photos of those that existed. I was only able to find the renderings.
Oh, I have no idea. I'm sorry. I don't do any Verado work right now.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't hold it against you. No.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
If only Sean was on.
Oh, only Sean. But
well, regardless, it's a great rendering. Yeah. And it shows what we're trying to show.
But the important takeaway though is that the home is designed in a way where it can have the parking that's necessary. I think there was one parking space that's required by statute now for these types of housing products. You can make it work, you can blend it in with the neighborhood, and it can fit in without being disruptive to the pattern.
And kind of building on that last point too, Ed, as a lot of our communities are exploring some diverse housing types for the first time, it's important to kind of look at some of the more approachable solutions, both politically with the community, and also what can reasonably be regulated by city staff. So on that, kind of exploring still some visually compatible housing products. What's great about a lot of these is that they provide a lot more livable space than maybe some of the more traditional or common multifamily options that residents are familiar with. So by introducing these products to the community, I think it's a lot more palatable for so many people who maybe are opposed to development of large apartment complexes or, traditional multi-unit complexes in any sort of way. So especially as new legislation is being introduced and updates to zoning ordinances and design standards become necessary, it really is crucial for your community to recognize the housing options that are available to you and also work best in the context of the existing neighborhoods and housing in the area.
Mm-hmm. And I'll add that the photo on the left is in Phoenix. I think it's off of
Is that Portland Street?
yeah,
Or maybe it's just north of Portland. I know it's over
north of
by
I-10.
Hans
Yeah.
Park, I
Yeah,
think.
it's right. It's
Right.
just Hans Park. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's on which is, I think it's on Third Ave, going north. So it's on the northwest corner. But it's a good infill project. However, one thing that I want to illustrate about it is that it kind of fills the entire lot, and that's just unique to Phoenix's regulations, and nothing in the state law or your ordinances needs to say it can be filling edge to edge. It has to just be consistent with whatever is the requirement that applies to a single family home. So there are ways to get this integrated. There are ways to get some solutions put in place that work. That one on the top right is another one in Phoenix. That's a side-by-side duplex that just fits into the context of the area it's around. Parking is in the rear. And then you have this one that shows like I believe that's an ADU that's a part of that one integrated that's attached to that unit.
And Ed, actually, can you jump back to that last slide
Sure.
one more time? I'm glad you included actually that Phoenix example, the one on the left, because I think it really demonstrates that in both urban and suburban areas, these options really can be attainable and accessible for a variety of different contexts. And so I just wanted to throw that in there, but go ahead, you can jump to the next slide.
Okay, and then this one, this is just showing additional homes that are illustrating those missing middle housing types, much like we saw earlier with the older homes that can be for 2 units, 3 units, 4 units. They just be divided up into spaces. Although not very common here in the Phoenix metro area, much more common in the east, the old turn of the century mansions that were developed years ago that are now in areas that have changed, and the mansions are kind of fallen out of favor. They're gigantic and they have so many rooms in them. They are good, suitable developments to be carefully divided up into a number of units. And I say that based upon some past experience I've had with those areas in historic districts where they've taken 10-bedroom mansions and turned them into 10 apartments that provided market rate or affordable units for people. On the right is just another way that the statutes support having missing middle housing executed. These are 3 tiny homes on a single lot, and this qualifies as a detached triplex by statute. And it fits on the lot. It has 3 parking spaces on the back, alley access. And while not everywhere in the valley there are alleys, where they can be a great asset. to allow for this new density to exist without disrupting the streetscape or curb front parking for the community. So you just don't have a line of driveways across the frontages. And each of these units is a tiny home. It's a detached tiny home. They each have their own little porch space, but it meets the statutory requirements of the area. Is it the best way to execute it? It may be, depending on the context, but having the entries turned to the side is a little different. If there's ways to keep those all street facing for that eyes on the street, that SEPTED stuff, they keep the enhance the neighborhood observation, keep the crime down. That's one way to do it as well. Now, we kind of went through this fairly quick and talked about some of those different ordinance solutions and some of the execution, some of the things that are occurring nationwide. One of the other things I'll make mention of is that, you know, cities like Minneapolis have pursued in the recent years to prohibit just single family homes on lots. And they have had quite a bit of success with that, generating a lot of multifamily, multiple unit development on lots and in areas where there was traditionally single family development. One thing that's come of that is because it's changed the character of areas, and NIMBYs and those who are against change in their neighborhoods can be a very powerful and emotionally driven group. They've been able to successfully get Minneapolis's program side rails or off the rails a bit through lawsuits. Minneapolis over the last couple years has lost a lawsuit. They appealed it. The appeals court said, okay, we're going to lift the injunction. We're going to allow you to continue to put these houses there. However, that appeals process is not yet complete. It was interesting because the appeal wasn't that it was lowering property values or increasing crime or disrupting the character of an area. The NIMBY lawsuit against Minneapolis was all directed that they said that Minneapolis did not do a proper environmental assessment before they put the code in place. And by adding density to these properties, it was going to have detrimental environmental effects. And the courts agreed initially with that group about that. And now it's been appealed, and Minneapolis has some relief in the meantime to continue this forward. But it wouldn't be out of the realm to expect similar things to maybe transpire over the next several years in Arizona. Montana, for instance, they adopted statewide housing laws that were fairly advanced as well for allowing ADUs, duplexes, triplexes on areas that were typically single family zoning. That's been caught up in lawsuits as well and been disrupted heavily from having the effects that was intended for many of the same reasons. NIMBYs reacting negatively, saying that there's been a lack of communication, a lack of transparency. They feel like it's going to change their communities, and they also feel that they should be allowed to make their zoning decisions at a local level. And so they felt their due process in Montana was violated by the state making that decision. Other communities around the country, I know that if you, and this, I'm kind of bleeding into the community engagement components of this. It is Arlington, Virginia has been one of the hyper growth areas in the east. They're also a very desirable place with very high housing prices, and they've been pushing very hard to have the missing middle housing become a regular part of their community, and especially in those areas that have resisted change and been largely single family for the long term. Now, those areas are likely to find resistance because of protection of assets and things like that. But this is an inevitable evolution of communities, and we as planners also need to be aware of ways we can accommodate this change in a compatible, safe way for the communities, and also in alignment with that state laws might be requiring. So what I wanted to ask really quick for the people who are in here, if there was any insight, or if you've had any action occur in your municipalities or your agencies that you work for that have been related to solving some of these missing middle solutions, especially in light of statute? Melanie, Gilbert, Mandy, Buckeye, and Rodolfo, anything you'd like to add at this point or any questions for us?
Rodolfo Lopez, City Maricopa. Ed, can you hear me?
Yes, Akiri, fine, thank you.
Okay. No, one solution that we're somewhat tinkering with is pre-approved plans. So within our kind of like a redevelopment area where there's these lots that are not HOA driven, they're just traditional lots in City Maricopa. We have a building official that has actually drafting skills, so he's drafting us multiplex, triplex type of homes or buildings that can be utilized within our Old Town part of the city. So that's one way that we're offering, and it's also a component of mixed use. So an opportunity for investors or actual potential small developers to take advantage of pre-approved building plans from the city. Less cost burden to kind of initiate and just incentivize the area with more go-ready plans.
That's a good comment. I know that South Bend, Indiana kind of pioneered that in the Midwest by doing those kinds of solutions, and it's been pretty successful for them. And it's just one tool in the toolbox, right? It gives you another option to incentivize and create some solutions for this affordable housing solutions. Have you had any discussions internally with your attorneys or anybody else about how Maricopa might respond to some of these statutory requirements and what they might mean for you?
Yeah, no, we're already, because we're not per the last census, we haven't reached that number yet. But we're already contemplating to get it ready for that. So but yeah, we're just preparing for it.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that's a very responsible thing to do, just because you are now subject to the housing needs assessment like many other cities. And that housing needs assessment informs so much about how you move with housing, how you regulate it, how you zone it, how you find solutions for the housing needs of your community. And so whether or not there's a mandate to implement through statute, it seems like it's the right thing to do is to get prepared for it.
Yes, right.
Thank you, Rodolfo. Sorry, Mandy or Melanie, would you like to contribute?
I don't know that I have much. I know we've already figured out our central business district. They just finished that, so they were just moving on to this next piece of identifying. We do have a lot of HOAs in Gilbert, so we don't have a ton of other space, but we do have it. So that was what they were looking at, identifying and tackling next out of our planning and zoning area is who was working on it. So I think the concerns here were really more about the fact that there wasn't a lot of clarity in there in terms of identifying whether or not you could have setbacks, and it just, although I think some of the intention was good, I do think that there was a lot of concern about how it could change the character, because not everything was as identified as we normally have some regulations to make sure that there's, that you can get, there's access to, if police or fire has to respond or something like that. There was a lot of not there. And now if you can't control that definitely, I think, was a concern of what could be built and not necessarily safe for the community in some regards.
I agree, and I think that there's going to be a lot of discussion over the next year about what those limitations might be, what the definition of some of the terms actually means, like urban services. I mean, you mentioned police and fire coverage, that could certainly be an urban service, or maybe it means transit too. I think there's a lot of things that are still up in the air. And while the legislation did provide some direction with regard to what you can't do, one thing we can look at is say that implies that everything else is still on the table. But as we know, that's probably sometimes not always the case. So Yeah, I'll be interested to see, what Gilbert might be looking at as we move forward as well, like any other community in the valley, because there's gonna be a lot of different ways to attack this. But we're going to, the services we provide through, like with our codes that we've developed is, we're looking at, national practices for code development. We look at how do we make the codes, not only respectful and reactive or aligned with the statutory requirements, but how do you make them, supportable from the community, understandable, limit the amount of staff time that's necessary to explain those codes. And I'm sure that's your goal in the community as well, is you really want to make sure that these things just do what they need to do without causing a lot of extra administrative pain, and get it over the finish line. So thank you for your comments, though. Appreciate it. And Mandy, anything?
I don't have any questions specifically. So thank you both. Thank you, Ed and Laney. This was a really good session to sit in on today. I think this is really timely for our team, especially because we're going through phase 2 of our development code update. And so we're rolling in some of these legislative changes as much as possible into this current phase just to tackle it now. I think we were kind of getting ahead of some of the ADU concerns already with our phase 1. So that worked out fairly nicely. I don't think that's going to be a huge upset, but we're working through the mystic middle, kind of that we haven't fully gotten through that yet. We're going to be working with our consultant on what that looks like and how we apply it to our code. But this was great. Just thank you.
And I can say from personal experience that fortunately there was a good planner there that had some ADU rules already in place for Buckeye.
Oh yeah,
legislation came along. I don't know who that
was.
I have no idea.
Anyway, so we do have the QR codes on the screen for everyone, both for the technical assistance webpage, as well as the post-event summary. We'd love to hear your feedback on that. And if there's any services you need, or if you'd like to reach out to MAG and inquire more about the opportunities that are available, please don't hesitate to do so. And with that, Amy, I'll kick it back over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Ed and Laney. Great presentation. Really appreciate everyone coming to participate in this session as well. It's great to hear about the work that's underway in your community and your perspective on this topic. Does anyone have anything else to add? Either a question, insight, comment? Okay. Well, please do visit the MAG website for more information about this event. We'll have the recordings on the technical assistance form. Please do take a look at what technical assistance you might want to request. We have a great team through Matrix, as well as internally here at MAG and also through our community partners. So really excited to be able to work with you all and look forward to any feedback that you might have. Again, please do complete that post-event survey. That'll really help us to plan future events. And thank you so much for your time today. I know that everyone's incredibly busy, and to dedicate so much of your time today to this event is really deeply appreciated by all of us. So thank you very much, and hope you all have a great rest of your day. If you have questions, please don't hesitate to let us know. Thank you so much, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.